Hi everyone, welcome back to Babbling Irons. So we've just had another positive result, another win away. So this season, so far, we've had 2 wins this year compared to when we went from August all the way up to Fulham not having one. We now have 2 away wins away from home in recent months. And on top of that, a team that hasn't scored a single goal in the opening 15 minutes of any game this season, and particularly in the Premier League, all of a sudden it's like buses and we scored 2 in the first 15 minutes. So stay tuned, guys. We're going to go into the Bournemouth game. And once again, we have positives to talk about when we're talking about West Ham and football. Long may that continue. We have yet another victory. We are now currently up to 13th in the table. This is something we probably wouldn't have dreamed of in the last 4 or 5 weeks, based on how we were playing, the mood around not only the squad, the club, in the fan base. So it's been a fantastic turnaround in recent weeks from West Ham to essentially just flip off the form on its head and to get back to finding a way in which to win, to get results, and also during that period to start playing some good football. And that's been something that's been desperately missing for quite a while for us. But fortunately, the tide does seem to be slightly turning. I'm not yet quite willing to jump on that bandwagon and say the tide has turned and so on. I will always be behind West Ham. I am behind the manager in the sense that I want him to achieve and I want him to do well. I never want to see him to fail or not to succeed, but I'm not quite at that point yet to be fully on the bandwagon that everything has changed and we should be, and I'm right behind the manager. I'm behind the manager in the sense I want him to get results and I want him to succeed because that means we do. But I'm not quite yet ready to commit beyond this season for the manager because there is still so much of the season to go. And I need to see more games before I'm willing to accept and state that the club has massively turned a corner. But I do admit results have changed and there's a very positive curve coming. Positive curve that we've seen in recent weeks. So, yeah, it's a good time at the moment for us to be supporting the club. We're seeing players starting to perform and starting to step up, and we will go into that very shortly. But before we get into it, the lineups for the game, I think the only real contentious point that we had when we were looking at the prospective lineups was who was going to partner Kurt Zouma. It was nice to see Nayef Aged selected and also to have a positive game as well. I think when we look at the front 6, I'm pretty sure that is the dead set team from here on out. I don't see that changing very often. Bit of a surprise was Bournemouth going into a back 3 for this game, as they've traditionally played with a back 4. But having said that, they got a really good result against Tottenham playing in that formation. So I guess it's understandable that they have gone for the same kind of setup. What was interesting, and one of the things that we called out, was the importance of Philip Billing to Bournemouth and how they play. And it's really interesting when we look at the average positions. And in particular, we look at number 29 on the right-hand side, which is Philip Billing. And then you look at Souček's position. This is something that Sloth and I was calling out as to, we probably really want to be in a position where we are looking at the likes of Souček to essentially man mark, to have probably not as much involvement in play as you'd maybe want, and to really just mark Billing, take him out of the game, because if you do that, you really disrupt what Bournemouth can do and what they do with possession. And, you can see that Bournemouth really had quite a few players in a half, but that's because they had a lot of possession throughout the game. And this wasn't necessarily an issue. We defended resolutely. We had good shape. We had good positioning across the pitch. And ultimately, we were very much in control. I know Chris Mapham came out and said it was a weird game. He felt that they had control, but they somehow lost 4-0. Now, they had control of the ball. That doesn't mean they had control of the game. We had control of the game. we didn't have control of the ball. That's something that Mapham hasn't quite understood. He thinks having the ball results in you actually controlling the game. It's not always the case. We pretty much gave Bournemouth their opportunities when they had their opportunities. They wasn't necessarily worked by them. They were something that we maybe gave them with a bit of sloppiness in possession, or maybe one or two players not doing quite the role that they needed to do. But ultimately, when we went forward, we looked a danger and a threat every single time. And as I say, we hadn't scored in the opening 15 minutes of a Premier League game all season. And then within the first 15 minutes of this game, we come flying out of the blocks and we're 1-0 up within 5 minutes. And from a defensive point of view from Bournemouth, it was an absolute car crash of a defensive unit. We basically went from front to back. We won ourselves a corner. And as we set up, if we just go through this, you can see here the two players we got highlighted is Lerma and Solanke. They're currently in front of Antonio and kind of guarding that front post area, but they're marking zonally. There's no man marking. There is where you can see obviously Souček is being man marked. Gerd at the back post is also being man marked. But at that front post area, it's a complete zonal area. They have 4 players in that position. And yet, what is alarming from a defensive point of view on their side is how they just allow Antonio just to walk. And when I say walk, I'm not being flippant. He literally walks past Solanke into a position where he stands in between him and Lerma. And then as the ball comes in, he takes a slight move forward before dropping back a touch and just having the clearest of headers. No pressure whatsoever. No one applying any kind of physical kind of touch or pressure or anything like that at all to Antonio. And he's just given complete free rein. And we know Antonio does have a powerful header. And before you know it, the game's only really just started and we're 1-0 up. It was a fantastic start from us. It's something that we haven't seen all season. It's something that we need to see a lot more often. It's something that we've not been positive enough in those early stages. In those early stages, we've been very much, in particular, the first 15 to 30 minutes, in many cases, of let's sit behind the ball, let's work our way into the game, and let's kind of figure out the opposition before we go at them. This time, we just went straight from the start. And that is something that over the course of the remainder of the season is something we need to see. If we start to see that, then I would certainly start to go down that idea or that belief that we have turned a corner and we've understood how now to work with the players that we have, to utilise those players. I think whilst there has been, from many accounts that I can see, that players are finally buying into what Moyes wants. They're finally understanding. But I also think it works both ways. It's not as simple or as black and white as the players are now just buying into what Moyes wants. It's also Moyes is now understanding how to utilise those players and how to get results out of those players. It's something that's taken far too long, which is why I'm still not in that bandwagon of, yes, he must continue, because it's taken almost 7 to 8 months to get to a period where the players and the manager are actually now starting to understand each other. And that's something that isn't necessarily praiseworthy, in my opinion. It's taken this long. I will praise the performances that we now are having, but what I will not praise is the fact that it's taken this long for all parties to come to some sort of equilibrium with one another. That in itself isn't sustainable when we go into next season with the same kind of level of turnover that we're going to have. For me, that is an alarm bell. But I digress slightly. What I'm just trying to say is that whilst things are positive, we also have to have a wider view of the whole situation. And that's why I'm currently, whilst I'm infused with the recent performances, but I'm not getting carried away until I see it over a more sustained period. Now, one of the things we did really well against Bournemouth is we allowed them to have possession. Now, there's often a cry that if you don't have possession, it's not good. But if you are managing the game out of possession, and by that I mean blocking off passing lanes, causing the opposition to make mistakes when they are looking to kind of play through you, keeping it compact, sending them into areas that you want them to be in, then you are controlling the game. And that's what we did for a large majority of it. We were really good from a front perspective. We were pushing up much higher. We were cutting off passing lanes, making it difficult really for Bournemouth to play out with any real kind of threat or potency. And they really struggled at times to kind of play through us. And as a result from that, we obviously scored another very early goal, again, straight in transition. And this was the thing that was impressive in the game, is how we transitioned from defence to attack. This is something that we've been good for in the previous 2 seasons. We've really struggled this year, but in this game in particular, we really seemed to be a team that understood our roles, and players were trying to get forward and burst forward into the area, which was really good to see. And this piece here was really well done. Antonio's in a great position. We're essentially allowing their back three to have the ball. We're kind of coming up into a bit of a mid-ish kind of block, but what we did really well was we pretty much said to Bournemouth's back three is that you can have the ball. When we're not really going to press as much, but what we're going to do is we're going to stop you finding those passes into midfield that you want. So Paqueta and Antonio doing really well marking their double pivot. Souček, as we said earlier, was pretty much just marking and following Philip Billing. And again, this creates then that kind of situation where really the only option for Bournemouth is either to make a difficult pass or to put a bit more pace into a pass, or to try and hit it long into spaces. And what happens in this situation is, again, Bowen moves to Kelly, pretty much forces him, so he has to kind of play outside. Otherwise, it's playing it backwards, but they're looking to try and progress them to move forward because they're obviously already 1-0 down at this stage. Now, Soufal's pressing recently has been fantastic, and we've really benefited from his aggression off the ball. And he reads the fact that the ball is slightly behind Smith and he's struggling to get into a position in which to actually keep the ball in play. And if Smith would have just allowed the ball to out of play, this goal would not have happened. But because he keeps it in play, Soufal, who has great urgency, pressures brilliantly and wins possession, and obviously then gets the ball to Bowen. But he continues his run as well. So he doesn't rest on his laurels. Again, Antonio straight bursting into the area. Same with Paqueta. No one was looking to be idle. Every player was looking to get forward. Obviously, Kelly's in an awkward position because he has Bowen running towards him. If he comes out towards Soufal, he creates an avenue in which for Bowen either to run into or for Antonio to change his run and run between him and Mapham, and obviously a through ball for there. Again, you then have Paqueta running in between Mapham and Stevens as well. So again, it makes a fantastic opportunity for West Ham. And what we do is the right choice at the right time. And this is something we've really struggled with for a majority of the season, to make those right choices. And as it's played into Soufal, it's really well weighted. He doesn't have to kind of take a touch or anything like that. He just has to just get the ball into the right type of area. And this is something that we've missed so much from Soufal over the majority of the season, including on the left side. Cresswell's crosses has also been vastly inconsistent. So if we can start to get that consistency in these wide areas, and we can get players looking to get in the area and runners from deep like Paqueta, this is only going to be of benefit to us. This is something we haven't done enough. We haven't had runners from deep. We haven't got into the area, and we also haven't delivered with any real quality. And the ball from Soufal is brilliant. It goes right into the dangerous area. It's a 2v2 in there. And when the ball comes in, Paqueta, essentially, he wants that more. He has more desire to get that ball than Stevens. Stevens is also not really aware of where Paqueta is and where he's coming from. And it's a fantastic leap, powerful header. And what's interesting is when you look at this final shot is that we also have 4 players in the area. This is, again, something we haven't done enough of. Both Bowen, both Benrahma have come in. Antonio's obviously in that 6-yard area, ready for any kind of knock-on or saves. And as we say, Paqueta, he made, without a shadow of a doubt, very clearly made that goal his. He wanted that goal far more than Stevens wanted to stop that goal. And it was a fantastic start. It's something we haven't seen all season. And I know that we started to drop off a little. We gave them more space. But again, it wasn't a bad thing. I know the perception is often that when you're dropping off like that, when you're 2-0 up against a team, that you are giving them a chance to come into the game. But also what it is looking to try and bait the opposition. It's trying to draw them out. And because we would count, obviously, when we look at the Paqueta goal, that counter, if you're confident in your counter, then that's essentially what you're doing. You're looking to bait the opposition onto you, to draw them out of positions, so then you can start to play through those little holes and pockets that they leave to then counter press them. And that's what we did for a majority of the game. We essentially baited Bournemouth in. And most of their chances really came from us being sloppy in possession. And it's one of those chances in the first half came through largely a nice bit of movement, but we probably could have defended this a little bit better. But what happens is Christie does really well because he comes off of Declan's shoulder in the blind spot to receive possession, and then lays the ball into Stevens, and Lerma does very well into moving off the shoulder of Antonio, moving into a wide position. This obviously then gives them a kind of numerical advantage in that wing position. Now, what happens is when they get the ball out to Lerma, he makes a very good pass. Crespo is unable to get a toe onto it. Obviously, Declan Rice moves with Christie, but Christie's already, in his mind, already knows he's going to pass and then go. So Declan is never really in a position to get near him once Christie once he lays off the pass in the first place to Stevens. And then obviously it's a fantastic ball across the area, which fortunately Solanke is unable to get onto. Billing is not quite in the position, but we're also centrally, we're in fairly decent positions in which to defend. And then Soufal does well to defend the cross back in from Tavernier. Kind of just gets a toe onto it, which dinks it past Billing, running in with Souček. And obviously Souček initially was away from Billing, a player that really he was man marking for the majority of the game. He gets himself back in, and then Rice is able to get the ball and come out. And that's kind of pretty much the tail of the tape, really, for that whole first half with Bournemouth. They weren't really able to create any clear chances, weren't really able to kind of pressure us enough to put us under any kind of real strain. They had a couple of shots, but they were well dealt with by Fabianski. And again, we pretty much funneled them where we wanted to. The only real chances they had is, as I say, when we were a bit sloppy in possession. And to finish, and towards the end of the half, obviously, we got another corner. It was well worked. And the one thing that we've been saying about Declan Rice that he has to do so much more on is be aware of those situations, like hanging on the edge of the area, being ready for those kind of knockdowns or those kind of cutbacks. And in this case, he doesn't go into the area. He kind of hangs back. And because he hangs back on the edge of the area, he's completely free. And when the ball comes out to him, he's able to take a touch, release it from his feet, and then he's absolutely able to power it past the goalkeeper. And interestingly, the 3 players that scored in this game also scored in the Ghent game. So Antonio, Paqueta, and Rice all scored in the last game and in exactly the same order as well. Antonio, Paqueta, Rice. So it's an interesting piece that all 3 players scored in the last game, and also they've all scored in exactly the same sequence once again. But yeah, it was a brilliant first half, actually. We defended pretty well. As I say, the only opportunities came through just a bit of sloppiness from us. But really, we contained and managed Bournemouth really well throughout that half, and essentially looking to then just kind of to play them on the counter-attack. Wasn't really that interested maybe in retaining possession as much, but again, we were pretty sloppy in our passing. I think we had 77% pass accuracy over the full 90 minutes, which obviously isn't fantastic. You would expect a bit more than that, especially when I think Bournemouth were around about 80% or so when it came to their overall pass completion. So I think about 87% actually with their passes. So we were quite down on that, but we were good when we had the ball in possession. We were able to dribble the ball and to win our duels as well, especially in that first half. And we made quite a number of tackles and interceptions as well. So overall, we did really well in terms of managing and containing what they did throughout the 90 minutes. Now, we then go into the second half, and again, we pretty much ran the same as the first half. Bournemouth had a lot of possession. They were probing and trying to find gaps, but not really much was coming. Any kind of opportunity that they had was a mistake really by us. One of the things that does have to improve is the communication within our backline. There was a point in the first half where two players almost collided, and again, he's just able to manage to get a toe onto it and put it off to one side, and I think Solanke then just kind of runs past the ball. Second half, same comes again, this time with Soufal and Zuma both kind of getting in each other's way and the ball going out for a corner. That comes through communication, and that is the one thing that we do need to improve, because we are going to be going to a very tricky game against Liverpool, and if our communication isn't to the right level, those type of opportunities and those types of moments are going to get punished. So it is the thing that we have to improve on. Whilst a really good performance, there are still things that are a slight concern, and shows that it's still a team that are not quite gelling or not quite understanding each other's roles and what they're meant to be doing. But these are really kind of nitpicky kind of things, really based on the overall performance, because players were playing to a very good standard. In particular, Lucas Paqueta was fantastic again. Being able to the realization or the understanding now how to utilize him, to play him as that forward pressing player, because he has more pace, he has good intensity, and he doesn't mind getting stuck in, is the right approach out of possession. When we're in possession, again, he then drops into that number 8 kind of role, doesn't really play in that 10, and I don't think it necessarily suits him as a 10. Playing in that kind of, I guess, that hybrid 8-10 role where he sits a bit higher, and really it's just to kind of help us flow into link play is far better. And some of his passing yesterday was fantastic. Again, his control of possession was brilliant. Him and Rice are really starting to get a very good dynamic and understanding, and really starting to prove to be a really good source for us in terms of managing that midfield battle. And we are starting to win that midfield battle a bit more when we're kind of engaging the opposition, which is in turn seeing us play better because we have a much better understanding. Soufal's also picked up in recent games. Again, he was fantastic defensively against Bournemouth. Was also pretty tight in possession as well. So again, as I've said before, if we're going to criticise players, we're also going to praise them when they do well. And by and large, the team did very well. That goes for a majority of the team. And one other one we always criticise is Cresswell. Did have a good game. There's that one piece where he was unable to get onto that kind of ball played in, where he slid and it just kind of still played through Christie. But again, not necessarily his fault. It was a solid team performance. And I think one of the goals that really just, again, highlighted just how well we were doing from that kind of baiting Bournemouth to play the ball into certain areas to then try and attack and counter was that Fornals goal. And it was a beautiful goal as well, for not just for the finish, but for how we kind of baited them in. And again, we allow them the ball. They have slow kind of build up. They're bringing it out from defence. But the positions of our players is fantastic. Souček is stopping the pass into feet. For I believe that will probably be, I think it may be Christie or so. Obviously, Bowen's in a position where he can pressure both the left wing back and also pressure with Souček. So he's pretty much cuts off that pass lane into there, unless Mappin wants to Stevens even wants to bring the ball over to his left-hand side more and try a pass. But again, he's then has into one side, Bowen also in a position to press him. So he pretty much is limited into what he can do. Obviously, Paqueta marking, I think that's Lerma. Obviously, then you've got Rice then on Ouattara. And obviously, Fornals can mark, obviously, Billing as well if he tries to be a little bit more expansive and try and play a diagonal. Now, Rice is completely aware of the situation. He can see essentially there's only really one option, and that is to play into Ouattara, and has fantastic anticipation. He sprints into position ahead of Ouattara, who's essentially standing on the turn, hoping that the ball's going to come into him so he can in turn and burst into a run directly at our defence. But Rice is fantastic, reads the ball brilliantly and intercepts. Now, the reason why this goal works is not just because obviously that space, is because the moment Rice wins that ball, both Bowen and Fornals immediately get along the half turn and they start to make positive runs behind or towards the Bournemouth defence. And again, Rice doesn't then wait or dally or delay on the ball. He takes the ball very quickly and then obviously dinks it into Bowen, who gets it into that wing position. And he does well because he slows it down just enough to give both Fornals and Rice time to get up to speed and get into the area. And again, this is something we said Rice needs to do more. And as soon as Rice made that pass, he was switched on and he sprinted. This is something he has to do far more. If he does this far more, he is going to score goals between now and the end of the season. He could easily get another 2, 3, maybe 4 goals before the end of the season. If he keeps making these runs like he did against Bournemouth, he will score more goals. And that is then when you can start to say he is understanding the role of a number 8 properly. Because obviously Paqueta did it and got his goal. This is what Rice needs to do. He needs to make those runs from deep and constantly push forward. And because he does this movement as well, he brings Lerma with him. He also pulls across Mapham as well because he's aware of Declan Rice. And it's a lovely floated little pass as well from Bowen. He goes one way, he comes back again, and it just misses the head of Rice. But Fornals, his movement in this situation is just brilliant. He goes in. He notices that Rice is going into that front post, and rather than just to occupy that same area, which is something we see too many of our players do, they run into the same area and they're not aware and making those acute little changes or micro changes to their movements in which to then give themselves a little bit of extra space to potentially get on the end of one of the crosses or a through ball. And that little movement from Fornals just gives him that time and that space to, when the ball comes over, again, great ingenuity. He only had one option there because he was slightly ahead of the pass. But the athleticism, the ingenuity, the I guess the willingness to try, he got the luck he deserved with it. And it's fantastic athleticism from him to put out his foot as he did, right behind him, go for a bit of an unorthodox scorpion kick, but still he makes the right contact and gets the luck. Fornals was very, for a lack of a better term, he was with the goal as well. Fornals was very much playing down the technical ability and the skill of it by, pretty much putting it down to having a little bit of luck. But there's no denying there was no real luck in this. He knew exactly what he needed to do. And it's a fantastic kind of reach back, really, and an arcing of his leg to make that contact. Obviously, Neto doesn't know where that ball is going to go. He starts moving across to his right, and ultimately, obviously, the ball goes to the left, bounces, it goes in. And it was a fantastic goal. And it was brilliant to see obviously a weight seemed to have been lifted from Fornals at that point, because he hasn't been playing very well, hasn't been playing as much in the 11 either. And obviously there was a lot of frustration that came out in that goal and that celebration, in that joy of scoring a goal that is so good. And obviously he was quite emotional, running over to the fans, clearly looked like he had tears in his eyes. But again, this is a player that not only seems to have an affinity with West Ham and seems to understand what it means to play for West Ham, or what the fans feel you need to do to us to play for us. And he's always given everything he can. In this season, for one reason or another, he's clearly been put out of favour, hasn't really played, hasn't been trusted, especially in comparison to last year, where he was one of our highest minutes on the field kind of player, to this year where he's not really involved at all. So I think that frustration all just kind of build out from him in that one situation. But it was fantastic to see him score. He really deserved it. And it was a really nice goal as well, because of the way that we essentially forced Bournemouth into that mistake. then had the conviction and the pace to get forward. And then obviously the finish from Pablo was fantastic. And then it was pretty much really the game then was over. We had a couple of other opportunities. One particular save from Fabianski was absolutely fantastic and an absolutely goal-saving save. Again, it came from, you could argue, a mistake from us, but essentially they won possession. They had a corner, which actually I think came from our mistake, the corner that they won. We then have an opportunity to break. Paqueta's not quite able to get the right direction and get kind of enough on it to chip it over Tavernier's stretched leg, or even to kind of put it to the side for Fornals to get on the counter. Tavernier does really well to close out that space quickly, to which to deny Paqueta that opportunity. And he gets it in the wide position. And obviously at this point, they've now got 2v1 against Declan Rice. So Rice can only really kind of take a step back and just to wait for Tavernier to see what he's going to do. Because obviously he can either come into Tavernier and the ball's played into Anthony, or he kind of holds his position and tries to get then in a place where he can then counter maybe the pass into Anthony if it's made, or to tackle Tavernier if he comes inside onto his left foot. Now, Tavernier does really well. He controls Declan Rice in that situation and then makes a really nice pass into Anthony, who dinked into Solanke. This is probably one of the few times that we marked poorly from across. Against Zuma, probably should be closer to Solanke. He tries to get round him, but obviously he doesn't get close enough or get round him quick enough. Solanke is, again, great bit of ingenuity to kind of get contact on the ball, because it's slightly behind him, and he has to go a bit of a kind of a falling bicycle kick, for lack of a better term. And as he makes contact, it's going bottom right corner. Fabianski was already in a decent position, but he gets down very quickly, very low, in which to make that block and obviously to prevent them from getting a goal. And he also gets a really good hand on it to kind of force it not only off the line, but out of danger, away from any Bournemouth player, and we're able to clear the danger. And Fabianski was really strong in the game. He had a number of good saves. He claimed crosses when we needed to. His distribution was good. It was a really strong performance from him in goal as well. And that second half, we had countless opportunities where we would get a really good counter. And if the final ball was good, we would have been in. We had two opportunities almost identical with Paqueta. Unfortunately, his right foot is not as strong as his left foot, and he was unable to kind of get the ball over. First half, it was for Antonio. It was clear in the left-hand side. He couldn't quite get the pass over for him. And then in the second, sorry, that was Antonio, obviously, to Paqueta, sorry. And in the second half, we had the reverse, where Paqueta had an opportunity to get it over to, say, Benrahma, who is on that side. But again, it's on his right foot and not able to get the curve he needed to kind of get that over. And another opportunity similar to that was Cornet, absolutely open on the left-hand side. The ball was fed into Ings, but he's not able to kind of get the ball out, twist, and then play it over with his left foot. Also, I don't think he was necessarily aware that Cornet was as close to him as he was. Had he got that, again, Cornet would have been clean through, which probably would have made it 5-0. Unfortunately for Cornet, he did actually score a goal, but he was marginally offside. But the goal that was scored was a beautiful piece of play. As it comes into Cornet, he does a fantastic turn under pressure. Then obviously there's some intricate play on the edge of the area before it's worked out wide. Played across goal, but he's just marginally offside. It was a fantastic finish, but again, marginal decision, but a right decision. And ultimately, we ran out the game very comfortably. It was good to see that we made subs as well much earlier. This is something that we haven't necessarily done often enough under Moyes. This isn't necessarily just something that is exclusive to West Ham. He has been like this during his career at Everton. I'm sure those fans will say very much the same around when it comes to the lack of use of subs and the late usage of them. You know, the game was won quite early, which has probably also helped that. But it's positive to see that in a period where we're going to have a lot of games that we are starting to rotate a lot more. Players are getting on the pitch. Now, they're not necessarily, maybe the likes of Cornet and so on, maybe don't feel like they're getting enough time. But if he can come on like he has and then make those positive impacts and to show that he can get a goal, then that's only going to improve his chances of getting more minutes and to maybe get the odd 40, maybe a 45 minutes here or maybe a 60 minutes there, because he's now going to be known that, well, his fitness is coming up. He's causing problems for the opposition getting in behind. He can get us a goal. So the more he can do that, the more it's going to essentially then put him at maybe more at the forefront of the manager's mind when he's looking to make changes or when he's looking to rotate. But yeah, I think all in all, it was a really positive game. It's something that we've needed for a long time to actually see a performance over a much longer period. Obviously, the Ghent game, we had 6 minutes where we obliterated them. And this was a game where we've probably seen a much better performance. I think this was the performance that they were hoping for against Fulham, in that you sit and you wait for your opposition to make mistakes, because they're teams that like to have the ball, but they don't necessarily have the quality of other teams in which to sustain possession long enough or to not make mistakes. I think this was the tactic we had against Fulham, but it was executed far better because we were better in possession ourselves. We were able to then play in the counters, and we also controlled them on the ball as well. We gave them very few chances, despite them having a number of shots. You would argue there wasn't very many clear-cut opportunities. And when they did have a good opportunity, Fabianski was there in which to stop it. So all in all, we've got to be happy with the performance. Still things to improve on, obviously. I don't think there's any performance where you should ever be walking away saying there's nothing to improve. No team is perfect. You just need to even ask Guardiola, who has a near perfect team. And it was a really good away performance. Another 3 points. This is the second away win of this season in the Premier League. Obviously in this part of the season, sorry. And yeah, it was fantastic to see us finally play as a unit, to get the 3 points and to, again, give us that breathing space. We're now 6 points clear. If you include goal difference, we're effectively 7th. I said it before, and I will say it again. I do believe now we are safe. One more win will secure it, absolutely, in my mind. But I do think now we will get the right results when we need them in which to stay up. Obviously, the last 2 games of the season is against Leeds and Leicester. So I think we could be safe before those games, but maybe the Leeds game could be the one where we outright kind of secure it. But I do think we'll do that beforehand. Whilst we do have difficult games coming up, such as Liverpool on Wednesday, Man United and Man City, we do have games in between that, such as Crystal Palace, Brentford, and then obviously the last 2 games of the season against Leeds and Leicester. I do think there is ample opportunity within there in which to pick up 1 or 2 points. You never know, it being West Ham, we may pick up a surprise result in one of the games where we don't expect to get a win. But one more win, 100% will secure it. I do not believe you're going to need many more points than 37 in which to stay up this season. It just does not feel like one of those years where you're going to need to have 40 to absolutely guarantee it. As I say, we're only 6 points away from that. We have 7 games to go, so there's no reason not to believe that we're not going to get 2 more wins between now and the end of the year to then obviously hit that magic 40 marker. But with the other teams still only on 28 and really struggling, I do feel that we're in a really good position because they don't have great run-ins as well between now and the end of the year. So it's time to feel a bit more positive. A game in hand is Man City, so I'm not expecting us to win that game in hand to then obviously get us onto that magic 37. But we do have to aim to beat the likes of Crystal Palace. We do have to then aim to beat Brentford, who are also slightly faltering in recent weeks. They've been very strong, but in their last 5, they've lost 3 and drawn 2. So again, we've got to be looking at the Brentford game as another one to target to win, but I think that's sandwiched in between the AZ Alkmaar. So again, if we can get a win prior to the Alkmaar game, that will relieve a lot of tension and stress. And that also then can mean that we can really 100% fully concentrate on the Conference League as well and getting ourselves into the final. We'll never have a better chance to get to a final of a competition. So we need to utilize this performance as that kind of stepping stone to then go on to winning at least another game in between or before before the Alkmaar game. But the last thing we'll say is, as a man in match, if we're going to kind of look at who had the best performance, for me, it was Paqueta. I think he was fantastic again. He took his goal brilliantly, controlled that midfield, was fantastic in that press. Obviously, Declan Rice was absolutely brilliant. And the final thing to say really was that our away fans were absolutely superb from first minute to the last minute. Loud, proud, for all to hear. It was great kind of voice you could hear from them, cheering on the likes of Declan Rice for 10 more years, Declan Rice. Obviously singing out Pablo's name, which obviously was great support for him as well. And it was really good to see a very positive performance, and the club seems very much in tune with one another at the moment, and long may that continue. And I think for now until the end of the season, there's no point talking about Moyes. There's no point talking about his future. Let's just concentrate on the games. Let's just concentrate on the performances. Let's address anything around whether you're Moyes in, you're Moyes out at the end of the season. There's no point doing it now. It's just point scoring. It just looks petty. Let's be united as a fan base and get behind everyone at the club for here and now to the end of the season. And then let's address it then, because until then, there's no point discussing. There's no point scoring points, because the moment he loses, the out crowd, who feel like they've been trampled on by the in crowd at the moment, will then come out, and vice versa. Let's be united. It is in our name. Let's be united as a fan base. Get behind the club. Get behind the players. Put the pettiness of whether you're in or out and the point scoring to one side, and let's just focus on securing safety and winning Europa Conference. But until then, guys, stay safe. If you have liked this video, please do like. Please do subscribe. Obviously, follow us on Twitter as well. And as I say, if you can like and subscribe, that'd be fantastic. If you can share our videos, that's even better. And yeah, thanks very much for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. And as ever, there's one last thing to say, and that is, come on, you Irons.